fast cuts of a bulldozer, Brenda pointing aggressively with a clipboard, and the narrator shaking his head. Meet Brenda. She thought an old utility easement was a permission slip to build a bike path through my active cattle pasture. She called my farm outdated. She called my bulls docile assets. She was wrong on both counts. The morning mist was still thick enough to blur the fence lines when the first heavy vibration rattled my coffee mug. It wasn't the low thrum of a tractor or the familiar idle of a neighbor's truck. This was the aggressive metallic roar of a D6 bulldozer. I stepped onto my porch, the boards creaking under my boots, to see a flatbed trailer parked illegally across my driveway. Standing next to it was Brenda, the president of the Oakwood Heights Homeowners Association. She was dressed in a crisp white blazer and designer hiking boots that had clearly never seen a day of real work. "Morning, Miller," she chirped, her voice cutting through the humid air with a practiced, corporate cheer. "Big day for the community. We're finally putting in that scenic bike connector. Property values are about to soar." I looked past her. A crew was already unloading rolls of silt fencing and orange cones. They were positioned 10 feet inside my north pasture, the heart of my active cattle land. "Brenda," I said, my voice low and steady, "that's a working pasture. You're trespassing." She didn't even blink. She just snapped open a leather-bound folio and waved a stack of easement papers, like a holy relic. "The 1984 survey clearly shows a public utility and recreation corridor, honey. Farm life is charming, truly, but it's a bit outdated for a platinum-tier neighborhood, don't you think? Progress doesn't stop for cows." What Brenda failed to realize was that an easement for buried utilities, like a water main, is not a blank check to pour 1,000 square feet of concrete for a bicycle club. But she wasn't interested in a legal debate. She had a rapid response construction crew and a point to prove. By noon, the damage was devastating. The crew had used a brush hog to clear a 12-foot wide path through my fescue. They tore down 2 lines of high-tensile electric fencing, leaving the perimeter of my farm wide open. When I tried to stop the foreman, he just pointed at Brenda. "She said you were briefed and that the cows were docile assets that wouldn't mind the company." I watched as the cement mixers rolled in. They poured a ribbon of fresh, wet gray concrete straight through the valley of the pasture. It was a scar across the land, steaming in the midday sun. Brenda was in her element. She had organized a grand opening ribbon cutting for 5 p.m. that very evening. She wanted the influencers of the subdivision to see the path while the concrete was still fresh and the sun was hitting the rural vista just right. What she didn't know or chose to ignore was the Right to Farm Act. In this county, agricultural operations are protected from nuisance claims and suburban encroachment. More importantly, she didn't understand the schedule of a 1,600-pound black Angus bull named Tank. Comparison shots. The pristine path versus the cratered mess. Brenda standing on a porta-potty covered in mud. Because they destroyed my fences and ignored right-to-farm laws, the HOA didn't just lose their path, they had to pay me to tear it up. $60,000 later, the pasture is back to being a pasture. As the sun began to dip, the Oakwood Heights crowd arrived. There were parents with toddlers on tricycles, joggers in neon spandex, and Brenda, standing at the head of the path with a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors. "Welcome to the future," she proclaimed to the crowd of 30 residents. "A path that connects our homes to the beauty of nature." She snipped the ribbon. The crowd cheered. The first few joggers stepped onto the path, only to realize it was still incredibly soft. That's when I opened the interior gate. I didn't have to drive the herd. I didn't have to yell. I just walked to the edge of the new concrete and rattled a 5-gallon bucket of sweet grain. From the treeline, 40 head of cattle emerged. They were heavy, they were hungry, and they were very curious about the 30 strangers standing in their dining room. Leading the pack was Tank. "Miller, do something," Brenda shrieked as she saw the wall of black hide moving toward her. "I can't, Brenda," I shouted back over the lowing. "They're docile assets. Remember? They just want to see the new path." The joggers realized the danger first. When 1,500 pounds of muscle decides it wants to be where you are, you move. The crowd scrambled, parents hoisting toddlers onto their shoulders and sprinting for the fence line. Then came the sound. Squelch. Schlup. Thud. Fresh concrete takes 24 to 48 hours to fully cure. Under the weight of a human, it might slightly indent. Under the weight of 40 head of cattle, it becomes a disaster. Tank led the way, his massive hooves sinking 6 inches deep into the wet cement. He didn't just walk. He stopped to investigate. He nudged a $2,000 stroller that a frantic mother had left behind. He stood in the middle of the scenic connector and let out a bellow that shook the windows of the nearest McMansion. Behind him, 39 cows followed suit. They turned that pristine gray ribbon into a jagged, cratered mess of mud and cement. They pooped on it. They slipped on it. They reclaimed it. Brenda was currently perched on top of a portable toilet, Her white blazer splattered with gray slurry. "You're liable for this," she screamed. "This is community property." "Actually," I called out, leaning against a fence post, "this is my private land. You destroyed my fencing to get here. In this state, if your property, this path, interferes with my livestock, you are liable for the damages to the herd. And by the way, that concrete is going to be rock hard by morning. It's going to cost you a fortune to jackhammer it out of my dirt." The grand opening ended in a frantic retreat. The next morning, the HOA board received 3 things: a cease and desist from my attorney, a code violation from the county for pouring concrete near a protected spring without an environmental impact study, a bill for 400 feet of high-tensile fencing and specialized vet checks for hoof irritation on 40 cows. The easement, as it turned out, was strictly for the maintenance of a 1940s-era water pipe buried 30 feet down. It gave them no right to build a surface structure. The HOA had to spend $45,000 to hire a crew to jackhammer the ruined concrete and haul it away. They spent another $15,000 on legal fees and land restoration. Brenda was encouraged to resign her position after the neighborhood's insurance provider threatened to drop their liability coverage. Today, the pasture is green again. There isn't a trace of the scenic connector left, except for one small, jagged chunk of concrete I kept near the gate. I use it as a step-up for my horse. Every now and then, I see a new homeowner stop their car at the fence line to look at the cows. I just tip my hat. They don't try to build paths anymore. They've learned that in a battle between suburban dreams and rural reality, the bull always wins.